Hi everyone, my name is Cynthia. Let's talk books. Today I'm here to talk about books numbers 21 to 25 that I read this year. So let's get right to it. The first book on my list, book number 21, is Jovita Warped, the story of a Mexican freedom fighter by Aida Salazar. So this is a book that I was emailed about by the publisher and I read via an ebook and I really enjoyed it. It's a children's book, so the pictures, the artwork in this are really great. I really love the use of color here. The story, I really loved it, focusing on this Mexican girl who really wants to participate in the Mexican Revolution, and she keeps begging her father and her brother to join, and they won't let her. And then her father passes away. She's grown older, and now she just goes and participates in the revolution. There is a strong religious element to the story because the part of the revolution that Jovita and her family are fighting for is one that's deeply connected to the Catholic Church. So that was interesting. But just the artwork and the whole story I thought was really cute, really great. I'm going to buy it for my little niece. The next book that I read was called Santa Muerte by Cynthia Pelayo. And I am ambiguous about how to talk about this book because I liked it overall. Except I think there's something in Cynthia Pelayo's writing that I'm not quite jiving with. This is the second book of hers that I read. However, the premise and a lot of the themes in this book are really amazing. That's not why I'm ambiguous about talking this book. I'm ambiguous about talking about this book because you cannot find it anywhere. Nowhere. I have spent hours and hours trying to find this book. How did I read it? Well, years ago it's available on Kindle Unlimited. I had heard about it somewhere. I don't remember now where I heard about it. So I downloaded the Kindle Unlimited copy of it and it has sat on my Kindle for years and years. Till now, I finally have been going through reading some of the backlog in my Kindle. So I read this one and I enjoyed it. I really want to talk about it, but you can't find it, not even on ebook. It was a small print that published this book, and then the print went out of business. The author made it available on Kindle, and it's no longer available there, and I have no clue when it'll be available again. So I don't know what to do with that. So I'll give you just the quick premise of this book before I move on. This is a book that follows a young Mexican girl who has moved with her mother to Chicago. Her father is the head of the chief of police basically in Ciudad Juarez in Mexico. If you know anything about Ciudad Juarez in Mexico, it's a border town that has been plagued by a lot of not just cartel violence, but also a lot of death and disappeared women. It was really famous in the 90s and early 2000s for the large disappearances of women in Ciudad Juarez that were never resolved. And so our main character, all of a sudden when we start the story, her father's knocking on her door and then he's in the hospital. And so clearly something's been happening, right? And then the story takes us into the cult of Santa Muerte. Santa Muerte is death, and death is kind of worshipped, especially by the people in the cartels, like a kind of saint, like people do in the Catholic Church. They make altars for it, they pray to it, and now our main character is having visions in which this death is basically coming to her with messages. And it is a I'm telling you, if you like these kinds of premises, I think it's worth it to read it. Like I said, there was something there that didn't quite work for me in the writing, but the story, for large parts of the story, I was deep in it, and I read it in 2 sittings because I was really into it. It's a thriller. There's violence in it. There's these kind of dark magic death discussions in this book, so I know it's not for everybody. But even if this sounds like an interesting premise, you can't currently find it. Hopefully, at some point in the near future, that book will be available again. But for now, it's not available anywhere that I can find online. So there we go. The next book that I read was one of my March Mystery Madness books. This is The Moving Finger by Agatha Christie. This is one of the books in the Miss Marple series, and it's book number 4 in the Miss Marple series, and it doesn't have a ton of Miss Marple. So the mystery was interesting, but it doesn't have a ton of Miss Marple, and that's why you want to pick up a Miss Marple book. So I'll talk about it more when I do a wrap up of my March Mystery Madness books, which I will soon. I'm in the middle of one of the books, so I'm kind of like holding off on it. So there we go. The next book that I read was Lone Woman by Victor Lavalle. This is a book that I recently did a dedicated review for on my channel because I read an e-arc provided via Netgalley. So when I read, when I get early access to a book, I usually like to do dedicated reviews to those books, especially if I like them. If I didn't like it, I usually don't even I just mentioned it in a wrap up. I won't do a dedicated review to it. But this one I really liked. We follow a black woman as the main character. When we first meet her, she is setting the body of her parents on fire. And we don't know what happened. And next thing we know, she's on a carriage with a huge, really, really heavy trunk. That's all she's carrying with her as she is escaping California and going to Montana. Like, she's just trying to get as far away from everybody as possible. And then slowly we begin to learn what is inside that trunk. And but also follow her as she starts making human connections despite her attempt to not connect with other humans. So that's why she's moving to Montana, and yet she finds herself connecting to other like single women in this area, some of whom might or might not have secrets of their own. And it is a really deliciously slow-paced, atmospheric horror book. If you want to hear more thoughts, you can check out my dedicated video on this. The next book that I read, so this is book number 25, I read in 2023, is Violeta by Isabele Allende, and I read it in Spanish after finding out that Isabel Allende writes her books in Spanish. But she's so big that they immediately get translated into English. I wasn't sure if she wrote in Spanish or English because I always see her books in English around. But I picked it up in Spanish, and I read it in both the ebook and the audiobook. And I highly recommend the audiobook. It's a really enjoyable audiobook, really well done by the narrator. But in the story, you follow Violeta from when she's born in the 1920s, when there is an outbreak of Spanish flu in what we believe is Chile. We never find out exactly what country she's in, but she's in a Latin American country. And I read online that some people think this book is supposed to be partially autobiographical, so I kind of in my head kept picturing Chile because that's where Isabel Allende is from. So she's born in the middle of a pandemic, and the book takes us all the way to the COVID pandemic. So it's bookended by these pandemics, but it's not about pandemics. It's the story of this woman, Violeta, and she is born to a wealthy Chilean family, and that loses all their money in the Depression. And then she ends up being brought up on a farm in rural Chile, but her youth is really kind of, it has hardships, but it's idyllic in a lot of ways. And then as she becomes a young woman, she starts wrestling with her role, what to do with her life, because she has ambitions. She wants to explore. She wants to get to know the world. But she is a woman from a rural town who has lost all her family's money. There's no family money left. And so, and there's a veterinarian that's very interested in her, that's courting her, and has basically, like, as soon as she's ready, the marriage will happen. So she keeps trying to delay the marriage, and I love that aspect of it, of like the choices she has and how she makes decisions, but also how sure she is. When she decides to make a decision that society will not approve of, she is like adamant. She knows her aunts, her family will not approve, but she's gonna make this choice. She knows this is the right choice for her, and even if it ends up being a bad choice, she's willing to live with the consequences of that. I love that aspect of Violeta. She has these like great adventures that she kind of describes in a matter-of-fact way. Like, to her, it's obvious that she would do some of these things and like have affairs with some of these men and like these kinds of things. And I kind of like that aspect because at the time, like the fact that she is behaving in a way that would be looked down upon is very true, but also like she has the capability of doing some of these things. She also has like this brilliant business mind, and through that, again, they're able to critique people of the upper classes that have a lot of money and who are able to kind of move through the 20th and 21st centuries without really getting hit hard by a lot of the negative things, by a lot of the economic downturns, and by the dictatorship in Chile. Like that plays a major role in 20th century Chilean history. But through the character of Violeta, we see how some people really don't experience all of the hardships of this dictatorship, in part because their money keeps them kind of protected in a lot of ways. So we see that, and we're able to see kind of the next generation of this family through the Violeta's children, and kind of the options that they take based on the money they have access to, but the political situation as well. So it's a really epic, big story. I really enjoyed it. At the end, I really just like wanted to get to the end. To the end, and I thought there was just a lot of things to dig into, a lot of really fantastic themes about family, about feminism and womanhood, especially from the perspective of Violeta, because she's in this unique position of having access to status. Initially not money, but status, and then she does have access to money, and the way that positions her in society, as both an elite member, but also she's behaving in ways that are not acceptable. And so it's just a really interesting place to put this character in. And then seeing her like navigate all the way into the 21st century, I just loved following this story. So I'm gonna keep reading Isabel Allende. I've already read a couple of her books. I read In the Midst of Winter, which I really liked. I read that with a book club years ago, and then I tried reading the book she published right before. I think it was right before Violeta. That is set during the Spanish Civil War. I don't remember the title of it because I DNF'd it. The problem with that book was I knew too much of the history, and because there was so much of that in there, I just couldn't keep reading it. This one was different though, because it's more contemporary, even though there is history on it. Again, because of the position of the character, I didn't feel like I was getting like a rehash of a history lesson. I felt like I was genuinely following the real lives of people. It's fiction, but still, everything that was happening was very plausible. So this one was much better for me. I haven't read House of the Spirits by Isabele Allende, but I think that's going to be my next Allende book. On the other hand, if you have another recommendation of what my next Isabel Allende book should be, let me know down in the comments section and tell me why you think that should be my next book. I was thinking The House of the Spirits because that's the book that, her first book, her first published book, the first book that made her big, and a classic. So I thought I would go back to that. But if you have a different suggestion, let me know. Even if I don't read it next, I'll probably be adding it to my TBR. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.